Boss mic trigger button.
Sorry about that, guys.
Mic trigger, mic lock button is on.
Okay, I'm doing a top 5 frequently asked questions. And at number 5 is, what is the worst album you have ever bought in your life? Well, I haven't really bought a worst album. I've bought a disappointing album, but I haven't really bought a worst album because I don't go buying worst albums.
Mic lock button is on.
You know, if there are about 2 or 3 tracks that I like off that album, then I tend to buy, or like the 2 or 3 tracks off that album. I don't really go and buy the full album. So yeah, I've never really gone and bought worst albums. I've normally read reviews or spoken to people about the album before even buying it. Hence why I've always managed to get good things in my collection. You know, and so that's basically what I say about that. There isn't really a worst album that I've bought. Yeah, that's kind of, yeah. And number 4 on my questions is, what is the most memorable album you have ever bought? The most memorable album I've ever bought? Well, yeah, it's got to be Africelt Sound System's album. Absolute brilliant. It was a compilation, unfortunately. I think it was either best of or greatest hits, but it was a double album. And they remixed most of their tracks on it. So it's worth a listen. And it's quite upbeat. So yeah. That was the most memorable thing. It was about £10 in HMV. Yeah. And question number 3. What's the most embarrassing thing in your CD collection? Phew, crumbs. Most embarrassing thing in my CD collection? Well, most of the embarrassing stuff goes in my work collection, but most embarrassing CD in my collection, I'd have to say Rod Stewart, because I like Rod Stewart, but then, I don't know, a lot of people, it all depends. Yeah. But also, Aqua Barbie Girl. I've got it on cassette and it still holds up. And it's still in good condition. It's not been played very much, actually. Yeah. So they're the most embarrassing things in the collection. Number 3, what was the best thing you had in your music collection? Oh, Left Field, one of their singles, and unfortunately I lost it because it went with all the things that I threw out. It accidentally went, and I found the track on Spotify anyways, so yeah, I haven't lost it, but it was the physical cassette tape was in good condition. No! Actually, tell a lie. I gave it to a friend. There you go. I gave it to a friend because I thought I backed it up, but I lost it. Anyway, moving on to the last 2 questions on the list. And question number 2 is, do you have any regrets, any music that you've ever bought? No, I don't have any regrets of anything I've ever bought. Probably of stuff that's creeped into my music collection, but nothing that I've ever bought, because most of the things that I've bought are things that I like. So yeah. And in at number 1 is there anything that you've listened to that you've found difficult to buy? Yes, lots of things. Lots and lots and lots of things. Most of the stuff you can find on Bandcamp, but yeah, lots of things. And it's just it's one of those things. It's very, very difficult. And there's just one more question that I'm going to put in. Will you do a video on bands that split up for the right reasons? Yes, I will. Because there were bands that split up for the right reasons, or just didn't carry on for the right reasons. And I mean, they can be excused, you know? Maybe they don't have any material to write anymore, or maybe they, or if they continued with a new drummer or a new singer, they just wouldn't be able to hack it, unfortunately. But I would include people like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin on the list, because they're the 2 bands that I can think of that split up for what people might have thought for the wrong reasons, but for the right reasons. And we all know that there are bands that discontinue for whatever reason, but I think there are bands that split up for the right reasons. Thunder are one of the prime examples. They went off and got proper jobs, but in my opinion, they also didn't have much material to write. If you don't have any more material, and Thunder are a band that just put out good albums. They've never put out a difficult or a bad album. Yes, they've had difficult times. You read about Thunder, but they've never put out a bad album, which makes me scratch my head. In fact, in the rubbish albums list and the albums that I've left on the shelf, there was a Muse album I forgot to put in, because the latest Muse album, I listened to it and I just think, yeah, Muse have gone all out, and it's one of those things, isn't it? I think, there's a lot to say about a band, and I think when a band discontinue or stop, they have all the right reasons to. And I think if Thunder carried on, we would have probably seen an album that probably wouldn't have been good in the catalogue. I've read interviews where the band just said that they didn't have any more material to carry on with. And so that, that's also a good reason. They want to get proper jobs. They want to get proper lives. Maybe if they have better material, they might get back together and put a good album together. And that's what they should do. That's what bands should do. Sometimes it's difficult for them to carry on. You have to tour a lot and things like that. And if you have to tour a lot, if you have to do shows all the time, if you're in the studio, demands to write new material, and if you've got a catalogue of just loads of good material, why put out? I mean, this is why Iron Maiden have gone down a slippery slope. I mean, they've had a few bad albums in their catalogue, but none that meets the rubbish mark. However, the last two albums they've put out are just, they're just best left on the shelf. I mean, I've heard them. I actually like one of their albums, and I probably would buy it. But the last album they made, the album before the last album they made, they only ever made like one or two tracks that would be best on a compilation. And I've said this in my last video, the video that I'm making, in the top 6 albums that should be left on the shelf. And half the time, it's people don't seem to think that that's not the band's choice. Okay, in Limp Bizkit's case, Limp Bizkit, when it's people who leave the band, and you get people who whinge and moan in the studio all the time, and then the record label say, if you whinge one more time, we will drop you. That's not the case, but I can imagine if you're Limp Bizkit and you just get like 12-year-old kids whinging in a studio about their next paycheck or whatever. I mean, Eminem puts it right about Limp Bizkit. Now, I love Limp Bizkit, but that's my own personal preference. But if I'm doing a video about Crumbs, if I'm doing top 6 terrible albums, and I found a Limp Bizkit album, and there's 2 albums, one that's terrible and one that's just completely unlistenable. And what does that say about a band? I think, though, if you're a band that has 2 or 3 bad albums in your catalogue, you can tell that the record label was pushing you at the time. Bands like Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, bands that have been rocking as hard as, I mean, you can imagine your granddad going, in my day, bands used to properly rock hard. And they did, because they came from nothing.
(11:13 p.m.)
Yeah, they came from nothing, and they had to, they didn't have their Lamborghini and the posh house and posh woman and whatever it was overnight. They had to earn that. But anyway, I'm going to go.
11:13 p.m. Mic, finish recording.